You know, when we think about bacteria, our minds usually jump to one word: germs. Simple little things to be wiped out with hand sanitizer. But what if I told you that's like looking at an entire sprawling city and only seeing a single brick? These organisms are the planet's unseen architects, and today we're going to deconstruct their incredible complexity to show you why they are, without a doubt, the true masters of our world. So let's just kick things off with a statement that kind of reframes everything you thought you knew. Bacteria aren't just some form of life. No way. By pretty much every measure you can think of, they are the most successful, the most dominant form of life this planet has ever known. From the crushing, insane pressures of deep-sea vents to the cozy confines of your own gut, their domain is quite literally the entire Earth. And their success? Well, it's built on a history that just dwarfs our own. We're talking 4 billion years. They were the very first life on Earth. And get this, for 3 billion of those years, they had the whole planet to themselves. And they weren't just hanging out, they were actively terraforming it. It was bacteria that first started pumping out massive amounts of oxygen, completely changing the atmosphere, and, making it possible for the rest of us to even exist. Kind of puts things in perspective, doesn't it? Okay, so to really get our heads around these masters of adaptation, here's our game plan. We'll start in their ancient, unseen world to get the basic design down. Then we're going to shrink down and journey right inside the cell to check out its intricate machinery. We'll uncover their genius strategies for survival, confront her two-sided nature as both ally and foe, and finally, we'll tackle the massive challenge of antibiotic resistance. Right, Section 1, an ancient, unseen world. Before we get into all the really complex stuff, we have to understand the fundamental blueprint they all share. It's a design principle that sets them apart from pretty much all other life on Earth. All bacteria are what we call prokaryotes. Now, the key insight here isn't just what they're missing, like a nucleus or other fancy membrane-bound compartments. The real magic is what that absence enables. Unlike our own cells, which are like highly organized mansions with different rooms for everything, a prokaryote is more like a super-efficient, open-plan workshop. Its genetic material just floats around freely in a region called the nucleoid, which means it can replicate its DNA and build proteins incredibly fast. This seemingly simple design is a masterclass in efficiency, built for speed and adaptability above all else. Now, a defining feature of almost every bacterium is its cell wall, and it's built from something totally unique to them: peptidoglycan. The best way to picture it is like a suit of chainmail armor. It's flexible, but it's also incredibly strong. This mesh of sugars and amino acids gives the cell its shape and, crucially, keeps it from just bursting under pressure. But here's the kicker. The specific way this armor is put together is the basis for the single most important classification in all of bacteriology. And this is that division, illustrated by something called the Gram stain. Gram-positive bacteria have a really thick, exposed layer of that peptidoglycan armor, and it just soaks up purple dye. Easy enough. But gram-negative bacteria are trickier. They have a much thinner layer of that armor, but it's cleverly sandwiched between two membranes. That outer membrane acts as a second line of defense, blocking the stain, so they end up looking pink instead. And believe me, this isn't just about what color they are, it has massive implications for which antibiotics can actually get inside and do their job. So let's move on to Section 2. We're going inside the bacterial cell to get a look at the intricate machinery that makes these little organisms so incredibly dynamic. On the outside, bacteria have a whole toolkit of different attachments. The flagellum is this remarkable molecular motor, basically a propeller that lets the bacterium swim around. Then you have fimbriae, which are like short, bristly little bits of Velcro, letting them stick to all kinds of surfaces, including our own cells. And then there are pili. They look a bit like fimbriae, but they're longer, and there aren't as many of them. They have a very, very special function that we're going to get to in just a moment. Now let's look inside. Separate from their main chromosome, many bacteria carry these things called plasmids. Honestly, the best way to think about them is as small, swappable USB drives of genetic information. They copy themselves independently, and they don't carry genes for day-to-day survival. No. These genes are for special abilities, for superpowers, like producing a potent toxin or, crucially, resisting an antibiotic. And that brings us perfectly to Section 3, survival and genetic exchange. This is where we see how bacteria leverage that simple design and all their extra tools to become absolute masters of resilience and rapid-fire evolution. Their main way of reproducing is called binary fission, and it's a beautifully simple process. The cell just gets a bit longer, copies its DNA, and splits into two identical daughter cells. That's it.
But its real power lies in its speed. Under ideal conditions, a bacterium like E. coli can divide in under 20 minutes. Just think about that. A single cell can become over 1 billion cells in less than 10 hours. That is the engine of their explosive growth. But what happens when the environment turns hostile? Well, some bacteria can deploy one of nature's ultimate survival pods, the endospore. When it's faced with starvation or some kind of attack, the cell encases a copy of its DNA in this multi-layered, almost indestructible shell. This dormant endospore is a biological time capsule. It's resistant to boiling, to radiation, to disinfectants. It can lie there, totally dormant, for centuries, a ghost in the machine just waiting for the right moment to come back to life. Okay, so they can reproduce at lightning speed, and they can survive extreme conditions. But binary fission only creates clones, right? That lack of genetic diversity should be a huge weakness. So how do they evolve so quickly? How do they share those genetic superpowers that are stored on their plasmids?
This is where the pilus and the plasmid come together in a brilliant move. Through a process called conjugation, a bacterium with a plasmid can extend its pilus like a tiny grappling hook to a neighbor, forming a direct bridge. It then copies its superpower plasmid and sends it right across. Now, the crucial thing to understand is that this isn't reproduction. It's a direct horizontal transfer of data. It's like sharing a software update. A bacterium doesn't have to wait for generations to evolve. It can gain a brand new ability, like antibiotic resistance, in a matter of minutes.
Now, as you can imagine, these mechanisms have some really profound implications for human health. And as we move into that discussion, it's important for me to say that this explainer is for informational purposes only. It is not medical advice, and you should always, always consult a qualified healthcare professional for any health concerns.
Okay, on to section 4, the bacterial duality. Because that same biological complexity that makes bacteria so incredibly resilient also allows them to play two very different roles in our world: essential allies and formidable foes. So let's start with the overwhelming majority of bacteria, our essential allies. The trillions of microbes living in your gut right now make up your microbiome, helping you digest food you can't and synthesizing vitamins you need to survive. In the soil, they're master chemists, pulling nitrogen out of the air to fertilize plants. They are the planet's recycling crew, decomposing all organic matter. And of course, for thousands of years, we've harnessed their power to create foods from cheese to yogurt. But that same adaptation and metabolic diversity also makes a small minority of them very dangerous. You'll recognize these names: Streptococcus, Clostridium, Vibrio, Staphylococcus. These pathogenic bacteria use the very same tools we've been discussing, adherence with Fimbriae, powerful toxins coated on plasmids, to cause diseases that range from a common strep throat all the way to deadly infections like tetanus and cholera. And this leads us directly to our final section, where all these different threads of complexity converge into one of modern medicine's absolute greatest challenges: the resistance challenge. Antibiotic resistance is the perfect storm of bacterial evolution. It combines all their core complexities into one huge problem. It starts with a random mutation, or even more powerfully, by acquiring a resistance gene from a plasmid. Then, when we introduce an antibiotic, we create this intense selective pressure. We wipe out all the susceptible bacteria, leaving only the resistant ones to thrive, multiply, and, you guessed it, share their superpower with others through conjugation. In effect, we're accelerating their evolution. So, let's just boil this all down. What are the 5 core complexities that make up the bacterial toolkit? 1. Structural sophistication, their unique cell walls and specialized appendages. 2. Rapid reproduction, that ability for insane exponential growth. 3. Extreme resilience, using endospores to survive almost anything. 4. Genetic plasticity, the game-changing power to share DNA and evolve in real time. And finally, number 5, their dual impact, the metabolic diversity that makes them both essential life givers and deadly pathogens. This quote really just hits the nail on the head. Bacteria are genetically versatile, adapting and evolving much more rapidly than any human or animal. We are in a constant, ongoing evolutionary arms race against an opponent that has a 4 billion year head start. Which leaves us with a final and pretty crucial question. These unseen architects have been shaping our world for 4 billion years. Their ability to adapt isn't just a clever trick, it is a fundamental force of nature. So as they continue to evolve in response to our actions, the real question isn't what they'll do next. The real question is, how must we?